It's time for this week's episode of Brandon Sports Talk, featuring in-depth interviews from those who are trending in the world of athletics. And now, here's the host of Brandon Sports Talk, Brandon Pate.
Welcome back to Brandon Sports Talk. In today's episode, I have the privilege of interviewing the Wheaton College head women's lacrosse coach, Coach Emily Kiablick. How are you doing today?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Can you talk about how you knew that you wanted to get started in coaching as a head coach for women's lacrosse?
I mean, this was a long time ago now, but I still remember the first practice I ever led at the college level. I was a graduate student at Springfield, and we were my coach that I had played under just left, and we were in the hiring process. So as the assistant coach, I had to lead the off-season training, and it was that first practice. That was the one I knew. I planned it. Whether or not it was a good plan was kind of irrelevant, but I remember just, giving the instruction and having these great athletes carry out the plan. And that whole process, I just immediately fell in love with and knew that I wanted to coach, but specifically coach at the college level.
What was that experience like for you as a player going to Springfield and getting to play collegiate lacrosse?
It was a really wonderful experience because I was a long way from my ceiling when I entered Springfield. So I truly had the experience of every day I got better. And I was surrounded by wonderful teammates, and I just really love the culture of being a female college athlete. And I also had the opportunity to play college soccer. And so I did soccer and lacrosse for all 4 years. And soccer was very different. Like, you peak a little earlier in soccer than you do in lacrosse. So I was a little more established as a soccer player, but also having that contrast and just being competitive all year long really helped me in both sports. Like, just, I played double the college games that anyone playing just one sport would play, and being, competing against other college athletes that often really helped me to thrive.
What was that experience like getting to be a dual athlete and playing college soccer and college lacrosse at Springfield?
That was really great for me. I can see that it would be very overwhelming for a lot of people, but I'm very good at procrastinating. So I'm one of those people that their GPA would go up when they're in season. It was sort of, the 2 weeks in the winter that I might have downtime. That was probably my rockiest area. So I was someone that needed the structure. I played 3 sports in high school. And then going on to become a coach, I definitely attribute all those different coaching styles I got to experience as a soccer player and as a lacrosse player to giving me just a wonderful foundation to be able to kind of springboard into the coaching world right after college.
Getting into coaching after college, what was it like going to Rogers Williams and getting to be the head women's soccer coach and lacrosse coach?
I loved it. In hindsight, I was just so young and so green. But I had a really, really wonderful athletic director who gave me the space to learn, to make mistakes, because there was plenty. But he was so encouraging and believed in me so much that I was just flying with confidence. I don't know if it was, I necessarily should have been as confident as I was back then. I probably could have stood to have a little more humility, but for me, it was just such a wonderful experience to finally have my own teams. As being an assistant in graduate school, I was just really dying for the opportunity to run a program and create a culture the way I wanted to. And then having two teams to do it, I was just getting a ton of practice in terms of establishing culture, a ton of practice, like planning practices, coaching in games, recruiting, all of that stuff that I was so young, I needed to fast track it. So, having the experience to coach two sports was a great foundation for me.
How is that experience like getting to start up a program like the women's lacrosse program from the ground up?
I really liked the that I had to think about every aspect of our culture. Like, I wasn't inheriting anything with that. With soccer, I was. And so I had to decide, what was I going to build off of? What did I feel like I really needed to change? But as a lacrosse coach, I had to lay out every expectation. Like, it's things you don't even think about. But you really have to be clear in your communication with that, because these women there hadn't been a year of recruiting before I got there. It was sort of just like they had enough interest through the club that they could flip the switch and go varsity. But again, that meant it was women who hadn't come there with the intention of being varsity lacrosse players. After that, we got recruiting, and that changed a little bit. But it was, some rocky times, but at the same time, like, I loved it. And I'm still in contact with some of the first athletes I ever coached at Roger Williams. Something as simple as like handing them their laundry loop. They were like, "We get laundry?" Versus, most of us go into college expecting those things to be happening, and they just were so humble about the whole experience. So it was great.
While at Roger Williams, what were some of your biggest accomplishments on the soccer side and the women's lacrosse side?
The two teams really moved in parallel. I think if you looked at the records of those two teams, like, where soccer had been more established, we were still in the bottom half of the league my first year. And lacrosse, we very clearly were the bottom of the league. And we just sort of took strides in unison. And my last year there in soccer, we had just this, story book season where we won all the games we were supposed to. We were playing Endicott in the championship, and Endicott it was a while ago, but I think they had probably snuck out wins the last couple of years, and that was sort of our last hurdles to win the conference championship. And we scored with 12 seconds to go, and held on for the 12 seconds and went to the NCAAs. And that was bittersweet because I was also going through the interview process at Wheaton during that time. So I left mid-year, and the lacrosse program had been in the very same place, like where a year prior we had lost to Endicott in the championship game, I think by a goal. And it was hard because I think I was leaving a championship caliber team that was just, they were right there. They had the bitterness from the previous season. They were ready to take the conference championship, but I did have to make the move to Wheaton at that time. Recruiting, it was the same thing. I loved recruiting, and I was really seeing a lot of success. And but one thing I will say is that I was having a hard time meeting the demands of recruiting for two sports. So when I looked back at my time there, I would have like an amazing freshman soccer class, and then like have maybe not as strong of a lacrosse class, and then the next lacrosse class was really strong, and they just alternated years. And that was something for me to digest and be like, a lot is going well, but it is very difficult to recruit for two teams the way you should and have that be sustained year after year. So that was something I noticed from my time there.
Coming to Wheaton, what was that experience like becoming the head women's lacrosse coach?
I had no plans of leaving Roger Williams, but as I said, I was starting to feel the pull that maybe it's not sustainable to be a head soccer and lacrosse coach. So I had asked for my position to be split, and I know it was in the works, but it wasn't happening. And so interviewing at Wheaton was sort of, I really had no intentions of coming to Wheaton. When I came for the interview, it was sort of like my bargaining chip, but also I was curious. Like, I played at Springfield, I was familiar with the new MAC. But when I interviewed here, I really fell in love with the campus. I think, as an athlete, never really saw beyond the athletic facilities here, and to be able to meet with different folks across campus and take the campus tour and things like that in the interview process, I really, fell in love with the product that you'd sell as a recruiter for Wheaton. But again, it took me by surprise. I know I applied here and I applied for the job, but I really sent that application with almost no intentions of actually coming here. So,
Of course, once getting announced to become the head coach, what was that feeling like the first time you stepped onto the lacrosse field at Wheaton as head coach?
well, first, the announcement was pretty hilarious. I got a few riffs from my Springfield friends, because there was one thing that you never thought you would hear is Emily Kiablick and Wheaton lacrosse, because we were just bitter rivals during my time at Springfield. So that sort of brought up that rivalry again in a really fun way. But, like, I had a lot of friends telling me they'd be sure to be at the Wheaton Springfield game that season, and it wasn't really clear that they would be cheering on Wheaton. But my first year here, I really connected with the seniors, and I came in January, and I was definitely in a different headspace. Going into Reg Williams, I felt a lot of pressure to make those programs mine and really establish, my priorities and things like that, which is all really important. But coming into Wheaton, I was more seasoned. I wanted to really give space to the players and hear what their expectations were of themselves going into that season. Obviously, the X's and O's and executing that all fell on me, but I did want to give them space to share what their culture already was. And I think because I had that confidence, I was able to build and give them that space. I was able to build some really great relationships with those seniors. Which, looking back, I'm like, you get a new coach right before your senior season. Like, that's hard. But those athletes I'm still in touch with, and I'm really grateful that I did take that approach, because we needed them to lead us and to help with that transition of a new coach. So I think coming into Wheaton, I just really, things got started on the right foot. I was inheriting a well-established program, and while we didn't have the wins necessarily, like it was the discipline, the way they cared about each other, that was all in place. I just had to come in and get to recruiting and really get to executing like a solid game plan that worked for us.
Of course, what was that feeling like the first time you got to step onto the Wheaton field for the first time as a head coach?
I was really excited about the future, but it was really challenging in that I had left a program that I had just put 7.5 years into. And so it had its challenges for me, just because I was starting over in a lot of those ways. But more than anything, I saw the ceiling as being so high here. So I was really, really motivated, but at the same time, going through the whole, this was quite the shift. I wasn't expecting this to be my spring. I wasn't expecting to be, kind of starting from scratch in terms of what I wanted in a team and where we would go on the game field. But I was.
What does a typical game day look like for you as a coach versus for your players?
Well, I'm in a position now at Wheaton. I've been here quite a while, so I have a full-time assistant coach. So there's a lot of collaborating. There's a lot of trying to control the uncontrollables on game day. But there's just someone to go through all of that with. But it's so focused on, what we have to do that day, how we best prepare. Usually we're doing like working with goalies, sometimes one of us or both of us before that game, but it's very, very focused on that versus with the athletes, it's a very student athlete experience, and they really have to stay focused on the task at hand. And if it's a full day of classes, like they have to go and they have to get that done. If they do tend to show up at the athletic facility early, I think they just like being in the locker room. They like being around each other. They like hanging out with the athletic trainers. But for them, I think it is challenging, but a good challenge where they have to just really stick to the task at hand. It's going to bio lab, eating dinner, eating an early dinner, getting over here for, our 7 o'clock game. They might walk in here around 5. That's what it's like for them. For me, it's just obsessing about the game all day from the time I wake up to the time I walk out to the field.
Of course, who are some of the teams in your conference that you compete against each week?
Our conference is New England, small schools, but a real and very high academic, wonderful reputations. Springfield College is one of them, Babson College, excuse me, all pretty unique in their academic offerings. MIT, these are some of our strongest teams in the league. We also have Emerson, which is a really unique, wonderful college in the Boston area. We have the women's colleges, which are Smith, Mount Holyoke, Wellesley. Clark University is probably the most similar to Wheaton in that it's co-ed and we have similar curriculums. Although Mount Holyoke and Wheaton were founded by the same woman, which is why we're both Lions with a Y. The Coast Guard Academy also is in the NUMAC. So as you can see, it's just like really high academic institutions, but all very unique, which is nice because we recruit against each other, but it's not, those situations are kind of few and far between. Sometimes we'll be up against Springfield, or we'll be up against Clark or one of the women's colleges, but it's not like day in, day out. Usually students, if they're really geared towards business, they're looking at Babson. If it's engineering, they're looking at MIT. So if they're looking at liberal arts, then, it's a Wheaton, Clark.
What is that home game atmosphere like when teams like Springfield come to home and MIT come to home?
It's a really great vibe at Wheaton. Wheaton's a small school, but students live on campus all 4 years. So it's packed with students, it's packed with parents. Faculty and staff are also incredibly supportive of our athletics here because it's a really residential campus. We also used to be a women's college. In the early 90s. We went co-ed, but I would say one really wonderful benefit of that is that we're very much in compliance with Title IX. Women's athletics is, really equal to our men's athletic program. So a lot of times if we have a double header for men's and women's lacrosse, like it's not like the guys are getting all the it's like people are showing up to support both the teams, and they're really just a wonderful atmosphere in that way. So I think students are really proud to take the field at Wheaton. Not to mention, we think we have the most beautiful field. So it's a turf field that's surrounded by wooded area. And so a lot of times there's a natural berm, but students just kind of pack the hill by our field, and it is a nice vibe, nice New England vibe.
What is that atmosphere like when going away and playing teams like Coast Guard?
Well, Coast Guard is a really fun place to play. Security's a little tight getting the bus into the academy, but it is just so rich in tradition, and there's, these men and women are our heroes. And so going to play at Cadet Field is it's just really special. And they always give us a really great game, so it's going to be very competitive. But to have these cadets in our league is really special. So Coast Guard, every NUMAC school is well supported by their fans, but definitely the Coast Guard Academy is a special place, and we get a little pump of adrenaline walking onto Cadet Field and just knowing how rich in tradition the academy is.
How's it been like every year since being head coach at Wheaton that you have competed for conference postseason tournaments?
We feel so fortunate that I feel fortunate that I can recruit for Wheaton, because I know how hard my assistant and I work at recruiting, but I also know how fortunate we are to have the product of Wheaton College to be selling. It's a really nice place to be a student athlete, and it really kind of lends itself to being part of like a close-knit team, a close-knit community. And so that makes our jobs all the easier. In terms of, our playoff run, we don't take that lightly. We know that the NUMAC is so incredibly competitive, and it's only grown in competitiveness. So, we fight like crazy to get into playoffs. And when we get into playoffs, we know like it's starting anew, and we've got to really, really leave it all out on the field. And I also would say that for as long as I've been here, our playoff games have been our very best games, and we've done a great job of climbing throughout the season, but making sure we're playing our best lacrosse at the end. So I am just so grateful that we've had that consistent playoff appearances to be able to really show our best lacrosse.
What does that recruitment process look like for those prospective student athletes looking to come play college lacrosse?
It's pretty early in the lacrosse world. Even at Division III, we've been done with recruiting for next year's incoming class since September. So it's a lot of connecting with sophomores and really trying to answer their questions and show them what we're all about as juniors. And then going into their senior season, it's getting an answer, like finding out where we fall in their list of schools, if they're going to commit to the early decision process for us. And we do fill our class in the early decision process every year. And I know that's not the case for every sport here. And some of them, are still recruiting in regular decision, and they end up bringing in less really strong classes. But for lacrosse, that's sort of the way the world works, is athletes are ready to commit earlier, and we kind of have to have our ducks in a row and know what we're looking for in an incoming class earlier. We do try to our culture is very, very strong. So we try to really get to know athletes in the process and have them get to know us, because it's more than just showing up to practice every day. Like, you really got to want to compete for the Lions and be ready to connect and have your closest friends be your teammates. And so we would try to get all of that out there early on, so we know we're bringing in the right women to add to our program each year.
As a head coach, what are some of the things that you look at in those prospective student athletes when out on the road recruiting them?
There's a few things early on, like we're giving an assessment of their ability, which usually, you could kind of break down into like their speed, because it's a fast game, their strength, their power, and their overall like skill and game sense and how they see the field. So those are sort of the initial things we're evaluating. But then beyond that, we're really looking at, how they are as a teammate. We value their coach's feedback on them. We also get on the phone with them right away and hear what they're looking for in a college experience. And that is also our way of assessing them as well, making sure that they're ready for the student athlete really competitive environment. And definitely at Division III, you need to see a lot of signs of self-motivation, because there is so much time that we can't work with them. And if they're setting their stick down and kind of hibernating till the spring season, that's not going to work out well for us. So we try to really evaluate the self-motivation, their humility, their desire to be one of many on a team, and of course just the nuts and bolts of it. How fast, how skilled are they, all of that stuff.
When it comes to the official visit, what does that look like for those prospective student athletes coming to Wheaton and seeing the campus for the first time?
For official visits, that's something we can offer them after January 1st of their junior year. And an official visit with us will always include an overnight. And we try to do the overnight at a time when they can get a well-rounded feel of campus. So ideally, they can see a practice, they can attend classes, they can do the overnight and get a feel for dorm life, because we will tend to pair them up with first years on our team. So they're getting a sense of, the freshman housing, which is a pretty special, unique experience at Wheaton. They all live in the same general vicinity of campus. And they're meeting with coaches. This is oftentimes after their official visit is when we get verbal commitment from them, because that's usually sort of the last piece. They've met with coaches, they've seen the campus, they've done all of that, but now they're just sort of really getting a feel for the team culture. And the best way to do that is to spend 24 hours with the team and see a day in the life of being a Lion. So for us, it's always an overnight, and that's a really big part of it. But it can take a lot of different shapes. But for us, it's really just trying to show them everything in a short amount of time.
As a head coach, what is it like seeing those freshmen put on that Wheaton blue jersey for the first time versus your seniors putting it on for the last time?
I really just love the whole process. So I love, when they're putting it on for the first time, I think I'm thinking about how they came to be here and what that recruiting process was like and how much they've changed, because I'm looking at our first years after just one fall season, and they've changed in so many ways from when we recruited them as juniors or sophomores in high school. And especially the weight room, like lifting in college is just a whole nother level for a lot of them. And so that's been really cool to see. And every year now, even just looking at our sophomores who maybe played more supportive roles last year, or if they were getting into competitive games, they certainly weren't like demanding the ball. They were just like, how can I help? Where can I go? Type thing. And now seeing them take a little bit more charge of our offense and our tempo in the fall season. And then, on up to seniors, like Wheaton is a place where students take huge strides every season, day in, day out. Our seniors every year are our best players. And every year when they graduate, people up and down the administrative hall are like, what are you going to do? You're losing this person. You're losing this person. I'm like, every year we're losing our best players. That's how we run our program. Like, the seniors are the most talented. They're the most bought in. They are our leaders. And so every year I'm sad to see them go, because every year they're just such great players. But I also know, like, next year's senior class is going to rise to the occasion. The one after that's going to rise to the occasion. We'll always be okay, because we just build. We're never riding the coattails of one player. We're just like building, and players are building for their 4 years, and they're leaving everything they can out on the field.
As a head coach, what is it like seeing those players go on and playing professional lacrosse, whether it's Athletes Unlimited or the US route?
Well, and I'd also add, because Wheaton doesn't have graduate school, I'm also seeing some of my players go on and play as graduate students because of COVID. I think that it's amazing. And especially because we're seeing older women playing at the college level and playing professionally, they're just getting better and better. Like 22 it's a shame that we, for the most part, we stopped playing competitively at 22, because like we're not even close to peaking yet. And that's how I feel about my athletes. So while I'd love to keep them and have them play their extra years at Wheaton, if they're ever mentioning, like, I think I want to play after this, I'm the first one to be like, go get in the transfer portal, like, get the ball rolling, because we all have so much more to give even after we graduate. So I love it. And I think it's very inspiring to people, regardless of what their next step is, but just to like find a way to keep their stick in their hand and keep going.
What is it like as a head coach seeing your players go on and getting into coaching after their playing career?
Wheaton is, being a liberal arts college, we're not necessarily attracting students who are thinking, oh, I want to coach after, especially I went to Springfield. So we all kind of went in there knowing that for the most part, we wanted to be involved in athletics well beyond college. But when it does happen at Wheaton, and it certainly has happened a fair share of times, I just love it. And I'm constantly kind of looking for athletes who are expressing a desire to be GAs or something like that. I've actually just hired a new full-time assistant coach who is a 2020 alum of Wheaton. And I could not be more excited. And I'll be facing off against a few alumni this year, thinking of Angela Malice at University of Southern Maine. That'll be a battle for us. I just think that the sky's the limit. And having coached all these women, I know what wonderful role models they are to future generations. So it's really exciting for me to see. And it's really nice to have more peers that you can pick up the phone and call and converse about the ins and outs of coaching with.
What are some of your future plans for Wheaton moving forward?
To keep working like crazy to try to, every season is the most talented Wheaton lacrosse team we've ever had, and we have to keep going. That doesn't mean that it's any easier to win the games, because college lacrosse in general is so much more competitive each year after. But to enjoy that, I get to coach in that environment where we're just gaining every year. But specifically for Wheaton, I think to build our alumni connection. I've been here a long time now, and we really kind of leaned into our alumni, particularly during the pandemic when we were all freaking out and didn't know if we would ever get to play a game again. And we have a lot of just amazing women who have come through this program, and they're great resources for the current team. And that just lends itself to the culture as well. So I think continuing to find ways to engage our alumni and use our alumni for all the talents that they have, because they're really wonderful at helping the current students kind of take the step and the transition from college to beyond college.
What advice would you give those incoming freshmen entering their first year of college lacrosse?
Well, to go for it, to find a way to be involved in the sport, if it's attending a walk-on tryout, trying out for a club team, or, just if they've gone through the recruiting process and they're pretty comfortable in that, just like really putting themselves out there to connect with the team. I think, general comment, but I think sometimes with women especially, like, they need to be told many times over that they're capable of playing at the next level, for them to have the confidence to do it. And this is just maybe me reflecting on my brothers. Like, they all played sports in college, and they kind of had no doubt. I don't think anyone needed to tell them that they were going to do that. They were just had the confidence, or should I say arrogance, that they were going to do it. Sometimes I see women bow out of it because maybe they don't believe that they are good enough to play in the college level. And it breaks my heart, because I'm like, you're just getting going. Like, you got to find a way to play at the next level because you have so much more to give to the sport. And so that my advice is just to go for it, to find a way to, find a program that is a good fit for you, because there really is a program for everyone. And if you happen to travel down one path and it's just a roster that's full and they don't have the space for you, it doesn't mean that everyone's full and no one has the space for you. We all have varying roster size, particularly at Division III. We have a very large roster, but we play against some phenomenal opponents who certainly have some space. They're just looking for the right people to add to their roster.
What advice would you give those players out there looking to go play professionally after their college time, going into Athletes Unlimited?
I think just same advice, go for it. Really take those steps to make it a possibility, and to assess why you want to do it. I think, talent is obviously a huge driving factor, but if you've loved every aspect of being a part of a team, go find your team beyond college, because, that's a place where you're going to thrive, and where people are going to really benefit from being around you as well.
What advice would you give those college coaches out there that are looking to start as an assistant coach, whether it's on the soccer side or the lacrosse side?
Just get your foot in the door. I mean, when I was in graduate school, I was a GA at Springfield, but I knew I didn't want to not coach soccer. And so I was a GA at Springfield, but I drove down to Wesleyan University every day to assist in their soccer program too. So just, it's not easy early on in your career, but the opportunities evolve quickly. So go out of your way to get your foot in the door, because a year from that, you might be coming up on a full-time assistant opportunity, or a couple years after that, really getting presented with an opportunity to be a head coach. And it takes a lot of work and a lot of time, but at the same time, I think in our profession, things evolve faster than any other realm of life, I would say.
What advice would you give those future head coaches out there that are looking to build their own program and build their own legacy?
Really think about your values. and make sure you surround yourself with athletes that maybe don't have the exact same values, but whose values you really respect, and vice versa, because the process is everything, and the wins and the successes come because you've done all these other steps prior to that. So it's sort of, the winning is the luxury that we have when we've done the work to build something really sustainable and fulfilling for everybody. So I think I fell into that because I was starting a first year program at Roger Williams. And so that's where I look back, and I'm so grateful for that opportunity, because it just made me figure out what it is I stood for, what I wanted the program to stand for. And I didn't get to skip ahead at all. And so for other coaches, I just encourage them to really think of that foundation, and not skip ahead, because that's not sustained. You have to have a strong foundation.
That's great advice. Where can my listeners find you at on social media along with the Wheaton College Women's Lacrosse app?
I am big on Instagram. So our handle for Wheaton is Wheaton W Lax. And then my handle for myself is at Coach Cabs, and it's KIABS. And so that's probably the easiest place to find me.
Thank you again, Coach Emily Kiablick, for your interview, and best of luck in your future at Wheaton as the head women's lacrosse coach.
Thanks.
You can find Brandon Sports Talk on Instagram at Brandon Sports Talk, Twitter at Talk_Brandon, and you can find me on YouTube at Brandon Sports Talk. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you again, Coach Emily, for your interview, and best of luck in your future.
Thanks.
You've been watching Brandon Sports Talk. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe to Brandon Sports Talk on social media and on YouTube.